the day I ended it. My name isn't important. I am Anna's husband, or I was. I never thought our life would crumble like that. I certainly never thought I'd be the one to bring the whole thing down. For 35 years, I was a husband. I went to sleep each night certain of the woman I would grow old with. I thought our foundation was strong enough. I thought we were unbreakable. I was wrong. The end did not arrive suddenly. It was a slow decay. A harsh word here, a cold shoulder there. At first, I reasoned this was how marriages worked. But something in our home began to sour. I started working late nearly every night. The silence of my office was better than the tension at home. When she would ask about the long hours, I would snap back, "I'm tired, Anna. Don't start again." My voice had an edge. Her questions felt like attacks. We began to argue over every little thing, from the bills to our adult children, to a loss of trust. I felt she no longer respected me. She felt I no longer listened. The days became cold, and the nights filled with arguments. We no longer reached for each other's hands. The smiles we once shared were gone. Then that final night came. Another fight. Her voice was trembling. My heart felt like stone. I looked at her and uttered the words, "I want a divorce." I saw the shock register on her face. Her heart must have been pounding. She said, "No, we can fix this. We can talk. We can try again." Her voice was breaking as she pleaded, but my expression remained unchanged. I just said, "It's over, Anna. I can't do this anymore." In that instant, I knew I had shattered something in her that could never be repaired. The weeks that followed were strange. We shared a home but moved around each other like ghosts. Our talk was only of logistics, bank accounts, and possessions. Each day, I think I secretly hoped she would fight for us, yet I gave her no reason to. She never did. Then we were in the lawyer's office. I remember sitting across from her, my own hands sweating, my gut twisted. The documents were on the table. Our 35 years of a shared life, all our history, condensed to legal jargon on a page. I saw her hand shake as she held the pen. She glanced at me one final time. I could not meet her gaze. My eyes stayed locked on the tabletop. I signed my name, and just like that, I had ended our marriage. The lawyer gathered the papers, saying, "That's done." His tone was neutral, as if it were a simple transaction. For me, it was the demolition of the only life I had ever truly known. I walked from that building on my own. I did not know what to feel. It was as if my entire identity had been undone. For 35 years, I was Anna's husband. Now I was just a man with no wife, no real partner, and no one to come home to anymore. That night, I sat alone in my new place. I just stared at the wall. I had no appetite. I couldn't find sleep. My own chest felt tight. The quiet in the apartment was an oppressive force. I thought of our early days, how easy the laughter came, the dreams we had built together. Where had all of it gone? I won't pretend otherwise. I had dark thoughts. I wondered if this was it, if ending everything was the answer. But a voice deep inside me said, "Not yet. Not now." I did not understand why. I just knew I was not ready to give up completely. Not that night. The next morning, I woke up and the other side of my bed was empty. It would always be empty from now on. I remained there for quite some time. I felt like a vital part of me had been surgically removed. I did not know how I would rebuild my life. I did not even know if I had the desire to. This was the day I officially became a single man. But it was also the day my real education began on how isolating life can be after divorce. I didn't see it then, but worse days were ahead. The loneliness was only the beginning. The nights were truly the worst part. I would lie awake for hours, my eyes wide open, my thoughts racing. The silence itself felt like a physical weight pressing down. I would toss and turn, seeking a peace that never came. Each night was a replay of our life before the end. I could picture her in the kitchen, her laugh, the particular way she used to say my name. Those memories were a greater torment than the divorce itself. They were a constant reminder of something precious I had thrown away. I kept myself occupied in the daytime to avoid thinking. I went for long walks. I read the news. I worked, but in the dark, the past always returned. The pain intensified when I was alone with my thoughts. My pulse would quicken for no real reason. My hands would tremble. One evening, I sat in my quiet living room and asked a question I had never thought I would entertain. Why do I keep going? The thought was terrifying, yet it lingered. I wondered if it might be simpler to just let go of everything. I was ashamed to think it, but the feeling was there. I tried calling a coworker one night. He was friendly, but I could tell he was busy with his family. He promised he'd call me back, but he forgot. It was then I understood that people have their own lives, and when yours is falling apart, they tend to step back. Days bled into weeks. My phone was mostly silent. No one dropped by to visit. I went to a local pub one evening, hoping to see a familiar face from the old neighborhood. But even if they saw me, they kept their distance. I felt like a ghost. One afternoon, I received a text from an old acquaintance. He asked how things were. I felt a small flicker of hope, but he soon steered the conversation to a business deal he was trying to close. He wondered if I could invest. I told him I couldn't, and his messages became shorter. He stopped texting soon after. I just sat there with my phone, knowing he was not concerned about me, just what he could get. It was during these lonely times I saw a difficult truth. A divorce doesn't just dissolve a partnership. It changes how you are seen by others. People view you as damaged. Some might pity you, but many will see an opportunity for their own gain. I tried to fight off the bleak thoughts, but they came back relentlessly. Sometimes I would stand in my kitchen late at night, not knowing what I was doing there. I wasn't hungry or thirsty. I just could not stand being alone with my own mind. I started having conversations with myself. I would tell myself to be strong, though I didn't believe it. I would tell myself that tomorrow had to be better, though I had no evidence it would be. One night, I had a dream I was back in our old home. We were laughing, making dinner, and the television was on. In my dream, I felt whole and secure, but waking up to the cold reality was a brutal shock. She was gone. That whole life was gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, buried my face in my hands, and felt a deep, wrenching sorrow. I did not know how much longer I could endure this. I did not know if I wanted to continue, but something inside me insisted this was not the end. Life after divorce had more to teach me, and the lessons were going to be painful. After it was over, I expected that my friends would still be my friends. I assumed they would call, see how I was, maybe we would get a drink. I was mistaken. In the beginning, some did get in touch. They expressed their sympathy. They said to let them know if I needed anything. But as the weeks passed, their calls became less frequent and then stopped altogether. My phone remained quiet. Men I had known for years suddenly had no time for me. I made excuses for them, telling myself they were just busy, but I knew the real reason. I was no longer part of a couple. One Saturday, I called Mark, a guy I'd known since college. We had been through everything together, weddings, our kids being born, even business struggles. He answered the phone cheerfully, but after a moment he started complaining about his finances. He mentioned he was in a tight spot and needed to borrow some money. He never once asked how I was coping, never asked about the divorce. He just wanted to know when I could lend him the cash. I told him my own situation was complicated now. His tone immediately cooled. He made an excuse and hung up. I stared at my phone, understanding he hadn't called out of concern, but for his own benefit. The sting of that was sharper than I expected. I had helped him out of trouble more times than I could count. I had always been there for him, but when my world fell apart, he was gone. A couple of weeks later, another friend, Tom, stopped by my place. He brought some beer and was friendly. For a minute, I felt a bit of relief. Perhaps he was different. But after we talked for a bit, he started pitching me a new business venture. He said if I put up some of my capital, he would make me a partner. He swore I'd double my money within a year. I told him I wasn't looking to invest. His smile faded. He finished his beer and left shortly after. I never got another call from him. The picture was becoming clear. People were approaching me with a hidden agenda. They saw my divorce not as a tragedy, but as a vulnerability. They assumed I was distracted, easy to manipulate. One evening, I saw a couple we used to know at a restaurant. They saw me, leaned in to whisper to each other, and then looked away, making no effort to say hello. It was a small thing, but it hurt. I wondered what stories were being told about me. Gossip spreads quickly, especially when you are on your own. I had made mistakes, but in their view, I was now the bad guy, the man who left his wife. My faith in people started to wear thin. I began to ignore calls from numbers I did not recognize. I kept my interactions brief. I thought it was safer to be alone than to be surrounded by people with ulterior motives. But the isolation was a heavy burden to bear. There were nights I'd scroll through my phone's contact list. So many names, so many years of shared history. And yet there was not one person I felt I could call without it feeling like an imposition. That is when the full weight of it hit me. Friendships can vanish just as quickly as a marriage. One morning, a woman I knew from work sent me a message. She wrote, "I heard about what happened. I'm sorry. We should get coffee sometime." Initially, I thought her intentions were good, but as we texted, I saw she was after something else. Her messages became flirtatious, her questions more personal. She was suggesting we could have some fun together. My stomach turned. I wasn't interested in that. I told her I wasn't looking for anything, and like the rest, she vanished. It became painfully obvious that the divorce hadn't just ended my marriage. It had altered my place in the world. People no longer saw a dependable friend. They saw a man who was alone and perhaps desperate, an easy mark. I felt a coldness creeping into my heart. I tried not to become bitter, but it was difficult. I had been a good friend to so many people over the years. I had supported them through their own crises. Now, during my own, they were nowhere to be found. There was one night I will always remember. I was just sitting there, thinking about the decades I had invested in these friendships. I thought about the backyard barbecues, the phone calls, the shared jokes. I thought about all the times I had listened to them talk about their own marital problems. And now, when all I needed was one person to share a quiet beer with, the room was empty. It was like I had been written out of their stories. That night, I felt a profound sorrow. It was not just about losing Anna anymore. I had lost the community I thought would always have my back. The divorce had cost me more than a wife. It had taken my friends, my social life, my trust in others. And yet, in the depths of that pain, I felt something else stirring. Maybe it was defiance. Maybe it was the first flicker of resilience. I said to myself, if this is how it is, then I will learn to stand on my own. I had no idea how I would manage it yet, but I knew I must because the lesson was stark. After a divorce, you don't just find out who your wife truly is. You also discover who your friends are. And that discovery can be even more devastating than the end of the marriage itself. After losing so many connections, I had given up on finding anything new. I accepted that my life would be a quiet one, empty and solitary. But then there was a flicker of something I didn't expect. The memory of my life with Anna started to change. The anger faded, and I remembered the good things. I started to miss not just the idea of a wife, but her specific laugh. The way she arranged flowers in a vase. It was a slow, painful dawning. Maybe the problem wasn't just her. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was us. I began to feel a deep sense of regret for what I had thrown away. I felt lonely. I believed I had made the right choice, but the emptiness said otherwise. I was strong, but I was not happy. I didn't realize how much of my life was built around her until she was gone. I tried to imagine her life now. Was she as lonely as I was? Or had she moved on? The thought of her with someone else brought a strange pang. I told myself it was not my business anymore, but the feeling remained. I missed the little things, the shared jokes, the quiet comfort of her presence. I missed having someone who knew my history. These feelings grew stronger over time. The divorce I thought would bring freedom instead brought a cage of isolation. I began to think about her more and more, not as the woman I had argued with, but as the woman I had spent my life with. I missed her. I didn't know what to do with that feeling. I didn't know if it was too late. I didn't know if she would even want to see me. All I knew was that my new life was not the answer I had been searching for. The loneliness was not a solution. It was just a different kind of prison. I had been alone for what felt like an eternity. The days before my brief encounters with Anna were filled with a dull ache. I never imagined I would feel regret, but it was my constant companion. I believed him when he said a new start was possible. I told myself this time I could be a better man. This time I would listen. But there was no one to listen to. The silence was absolute. I had destroyed our shared life. It was a truth I had to face every morning. Nothing grand, but it was everything. I wanted to tell her I was sorry, not just for the end, but for my part in the slow erosion of our love. A week before I saw her, I had a particularly bad night. I almost called her. I had her number on my screen. I told myself not to be a fool, that she wouldn't want to hear from me, that I had no right to disturb her peace. I gave myself the advice without a second thought. I promised I would leave her alone. The night before I saw her at the market, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about what a fool I had been. I imagined she was happy now. I imagined she had found someone who treated her better. The loneliness I had chosen for myself was finally becoming unbearable. On the afternoon I saw her, I had just gone out for some groceries. I felt nervous, but it was a relief to be out. I kept my head down. Then I heard her voice. I had not expected to see her. Hours passed. I called no one because there was no one to call. My hands started to shake. By the evening, I was panicking. I thought about what I had lost again and again. No answer. Finally, one afternoon, I went to a cafe. It was a message to myself. Just 6 words. I am sorry. I did this. At first, I couldn't accept it. I read my own thoughts over and over. Then the truth hit me. She was gone. There would be no second chance. I had taken my own happiness and my own future, and now I was alone. I felt my resolve crack. I sat down and held my coffee cup like it was the only thing grounding me in reality. My chest ached. My eyes burned, but the tears wouldn't come. I was numb. I was in total shock. When the sorrow finally washed over me, it didn't stop. I mourned until my head pounded, until my whole body was exhausted. I thought about every choice I had made in the past few years. The harsh words I had said, the coldness I had shown, all of it had been a lie I told myself. The worst part was not being alone. It was realizing that I had pushed away the only person who had ever truly known me. I felt foolish. I felt so small. I felt like I had become one of those men I had always pitied, old and alone by their own making. That night I didn't eat. I didn't move from my chair. I just stared at the wall. I kept thinking about my life with Anna. For all our fights, she had never abandoned me. She had never been intentionally cruel. She had never used my love as a weapon. I realized what I had thrown away was not just a marriage. It was a rare and precious thing. It was true companionship. Behind the anger and the pride was a woman who had loved me, and I had been too blind, too stubborn, and too full of my own pain to see it. In the days that followed, I avoided going out. I didn't want to see happy couples. I didn't want to feel the sting of my own failure. I felt I had failed again, not just at marriage, but at being a decent man. The future I had envisioned was gone. In its place was just a deep, profound emptiness. I didn't know if I would ever forgive myself. I didn't know if I even deserved to try. But somewhere in all the pain, there was a small thought. Told me this was not the end of my story. I didn't know it yet, but soon I would see her again. A face that would change my whole world. The days after that realization were long. I woke up each morning with a heavy heart. My mind kept showing me my mistakes. The arguments, the silence, the day I had looked at her and said it was over. I wanted to undo it, but I could not. I began to force myself out. I didn't want to become a hermit. I didn't want pity. I stayed inside my own head, eating little, speaking less. My own reflection looked like a stranger. I barely recognized the man I had become. Sometimes when the regret was overwhelming, my thoughts would turn to our shared history. Our marriage had broken apart. I had hurt her in ways I knew I could never take back. But even with all my flaws, I had never betrayed her for personal gain. I had never lied to her just to get something I wanted. That truth somehow made my own actions feel worse. One afternoon, I made myself go to the market. I told myself it was a simple errand, nothing more. I tried to focus on my list. Then, from a few aisles away, I heard a voice that stopped my heart. It was a sound I knew better than my own. I turned, and there she was, my ex-wife Anna. She looked older, more tired, but her eyes hadn't changed. For a heartbeat, we both just stood there, stunned by the sudden encounter after so much time had passed. My mouth felt like sand. I gave a small nod. She nodded in return. We exchanged a few brief, polite words. The exchange was simple, but underneath it were 35 years of a life we once shared. We did not speak for long. I said I had to go. She said goodbye. I walked away, but my thoughts were stuck in that moment. I remembered how she was once the center of my daily life. It wasn't love that I felt then. It was something different, a peculiar sense of connection, like finding something you thought you had lost forever. That night, I could not sleep, thinking about her. I wondered if she ever thought of me. I wondered if, as I did, she sometimes asked herself if our story could have ended differently. A week later, our paths crossed again. This time, I was sitting alone in a small cafe. I saw her standing outside, looking hesitant, as if she were deciding whether to come in. My own heart was pounding. I wanted to see her walk away, but a stronger part of me hoped she would come closer. She approached my table. I looked up, surprised, but I was not unhappy to see her there. "Hello," I said, saying her name for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. We started talking about easy subjects, our children, our lives since the divorce. For a little while, it almost felt like it used to, but a tension hung in the air, as if we were both afraid to say what we were really thinking. Then I looked at her and asked, "Are you okay?" My voice was softer than I intended. It was that simple question that seemed to open a floodgate within her. She told me everything. She told me about a man named Daniel, about how she had trusted him, about a wedding that was never meant to be. Her voice quivered as she spoke, but she continued. She told me how broken she had felt since then, how she had started to doubt that real love could even exist. I did not interrupt. I did not look away. I simply listened, and for the first time in so long, I felt like I was truly hearing her. When she had finished, the silence between us was heavy. Her eyes looked so sad. "I'm sorry, Anna," I said at last. "I know I hurt you too. I wish I had been a better man. Maybe if we had talked more, if we had listened more, things would not have ended the way they did." My words seemed to affect her more than I had expected. For years, she must have believed I felt no remorse. Hearing my apology seemed to break down a wall inside her. She told me she had made mistakes too, that her pride and her anger had pushed me away until it was too late, that maybe we had both been more focused on being right than on being together. We talked for what felt like hours. There was no anger, no accusations, just the unvarnished truth shared between two people who had once promised to love each other forever. We came to one conclusion. The divorce had fixed nothing. It had only made us both more vulnerable, more isolated, and easier targets for a cruel world. Before we parted, I said something I hadn't planned. We can't change the past, but maybe we can stop it from hurting us more. She just nodded. I did not know what would happen between us, but for the first time in what felt like an age, I felt a tiny, fragile spark of hope. Maybe some doors are not meant to stay shut forever. When I left that cafe, I felt a change in myself. Something had settled within me. It wasn't the false hope that comes from empty promises and easy words, the kind I imagined she had heard from that other man. This was a quiet feeling. It was solid. It felt like I had recovered a part of myself I believed was gone for good. I kept replaying what I had said to her. We can't change the past, but maybe we can stop it from hurting us more. Those words echoed in my own mind. I began to see that so much of my own suffering had come from clinging to my past mistakes like a heavy burden. Every argument, every bitter word, every lonely evening, I had carried them all with me, and perhaps it was finally time to set some of them down. A few days later, I called her. I asked if she wanted to get lunch. There was a pause on her end, but then she agreed. When we met, the conversation was easier. We didn't feel the need to solve our entire past in one sitting. We just ate and talked. We talked about our kids, about the simple things in our lives. We even managed to laugh, something we had not shared in many years. I had forgotten how good it felt to laugh honestly, without the weight of unspoken pain. With her, I didn't need to pretend I was doing fine. She already knew I wasn't. Over the next few weeks, we continued to meet. We never called it a reconciliation. We did not make promises that we were not sure we could keep. But we started to see each other with a new clarity we never had before. We spoke with more honesty, and we listened with more patience. There was no pressure. One evening, I confessed something I had kept inside for years. After the divorce, I always worried you thought I never loved you. She looked at me and I saw tears in her eyes. I had to continue. That's not true. I always loved you, Anna. I just lost my way and didn't know how to show it. And I allowed my own pride to destroy everything. Hearing myself say that out loud was a release. It was not about erasing the past, but about finally facing the truth of it. The love we shared had been real. It had been lost under layers of hurt and resentment, but it had existed. And that meant my 35 years with her had not been a lie. She told me more about Daniel, about his deception, about the money, and the day he abandoned her. Her voice was steady, but I saw the pain in her eyes. She did not hide a thing. I listened with a calm expression, but inside I felt a burning anger. Not at her, but for her. You didn't deserve that, I said, my voice low. You deserved someone who would protect you, not take from you. In that moment, I understood something critical. The outside world did not care about our pain. Most people had seen our divorce as an opportunity to exploit our weaknesses. But here, across the table from me, was the one person who knew me at my absolute worst and still wanted to understand. One afternoon after a long talk, I said, Anna, maybe we can't reverse the divorce, but we can write the next chapter. We can look out for each other. We can make sure nobody takes advantage of either one of us ever again. She thought about that for a long time. We were not the same two people we were so long ago. We had both been hurt too much to ever pretend we could just go back. But maybe going back was not the point. Maybe the point was to go forward, but as allies. We began to help each other. I would call to see if she needed anything from the store. She would send me a text to remind me about my doctor appointments. Sometimes we would just sit in silence together, finding comfort in the simple fact that the other was there. Slowly, the heavy weight I had carried for so long began to ease. The nights felt shorter. The mornings felt less desolate. I started to think that perhaps I would not have to face my struggles all on my own anymore. One day we were having coffee when she said, You know, I once thought getting divorced was the only way to stop the pain. I looked at her for a long moment and asked, And what do you think now? A small smile touched her lips. Now I think divorce just gave the pain a bigger house to live in. We both knew she was right. The fights we had could have been navigated if we had just talked. If we had tried harder. The years we spent apart had taught us that the enemy was never each other. It was the silence, our pride, and the way we had let the noise of the world silence our own hearts. We made an unspoken pact that day. It was not a vow to get back together. It was not even a promise to talk every single day, but a simple commitment that neither of us would face the world alone anymore. We had both learned what this world does to people on their own. We had both survived it. In time, our children and a few old friends noticed. There were whispers, of course, but for the first time, we did not care. We knew this was not about anyone else's approval. It was about ensuring that the final years of our lives were filled with peace instead of regret. I sometimes still feel a flash of anger when I think of that man Daniel. Not because he took her money, but because his cruelty taught me a lesson I should have already known. That not every smile is genuine, and not every declaration of love is true. But his actions, unintentionally, also led her back to me, the one person who truly knew her worth. Looking back, I can see my story now. The divorce was not a solution. It only made me a lonely man and made her a target for the cruelty of others. It took betrayal, isolation, and heartbreak for me to finally understand that some connections are too important to throw away, even if they can't be what they once were. Today, I am not a lonely man. I am not the same man who signed those papers with a cold heart. I am stronger, yet I am also more humble in the ways that matter. I know who will stand with me when life is hard, and I know who will turn their back. If there is one lesson I have learned, it is this. Sometimes walking away does not make you free. Sometimes it just traps you in a new kind of prison. But talking, listening, and trying, especially when it is difficult, can heal things you thought were broken forever. And so my ex-wife and I, two people who once shattered each other's hearts, now choose to stand together. Not because our past was without fault, but because our future will be better if we face it as one.